Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Polaris. It's nice to meet you if you are new here, and it's great to see you again if you are back. So, today I'll be talking a little bit about the overall coloring and rendering of this behemoth of an illustration that was Majesty. Honestly, it looks a lot more difficult than it actually was. With time, I managed to develop a more simplified style of art, so to speak, and it doesn't take me months to finish an illustration like it used to. Also, the style I'm using with the illustrations in this Ghost series and my Webtoon is a lot simpler when it comes to coloring, precisely because if it wasn't, it would take me forever and I would never finish anything. I think a lot of people have the same problem I used to have, and I still struggle with it sometimes. I'm a crazy perfectionist and I like having everything under control. So if I don't limit myself in a style or a more simplified thing, I am always going to find something to correct or to render better or to add details or to change or to... you get the idea. The overcorrection and over scrutiny makes it impossible for me to consider any kind of artwork done. Be it a song, a poem, artwork, story, there is always something I can correct to make better. Everything is always a work in progress. So this is, I think, one of the most valuable advices out there, that when I learned to actually listen, it changed a lot of things for me. At some point, you have to consider your work as finished. You're not going to retouch it, correct it, or add something better. Just put it out there and consider it done. And I know that, yes, you're going to look at it or listen to it or read it later on and be like, oh man, I could have done it this way or that way. I could correct this, I could add that, and that is life. It's done. It's over. Move on. Use your previous work and the things you saw you could improve on it to make your next one better. And it's a cycle, because then you see new things to improve on your next one and apply it on the next one, and so on. Being an artist is literally never being satisfied with your work and always knowing you can do better and improve as you go. I have a current rule, even being a crazy perfectionist as I am, that doing is always better than not doing. It's a phrase I read somewhere about a musician I admire who I really forgot who was right now, but it stayed with me and made me begin a lot of stuff I wouldn't have if I kept always trying to only put out there wonderfully perfect works of art. I wouldn't have made this channel. I wouldn't have started my Webtoon and kept going with it. And I wouldn't be doing these sets of illustrations. Whenever I'm down a spiral of everything has to be perfect or it isn't even worth it, I have this little voice at the back of my head saying, hey, doing is always better than not doing. At least you are doing something. If I wait for perfection, I never do anything. But if I do what I can at the moment, at least I am doing it. And I am putting my work out there. It beats perfection anytime. With that being said, now I am actually going to start talking about the illustration per se. When it comes to coloring, I have a bit of a hard time. I don't really like the colors I choose. I end up always choosing things that are too bright or too saturated for my tastes, and I need to remind myself to tone it down. When it comes to the ghost illustrations, that is precisely what the style is, so I don't have to worry too much about that. It takes a while for me though. Coloring doesn't come naturally to me as it does when I am doing it with my color pencils. I have no idea why traditional media is so much easier and more natural to work with in my case. Here, I am using the software called Krita, as I mentioned before. I like the texture of the brushes and how it works with the pen pressure. Differently than Photoshop, where you have to manually change the size of the brush, on Krita the brush size varies according to your pen pressure too. It feels a lot more like traditional media to me, and that's why I work better with Krita, I think. The style of this illustration calls for a hard brush though. I use one that's like a no texture paintbrush, and it works fine for me. For the line art, I use a textured paintbrush that I think gives a nice effect. I don't have downloaded any other brushes. I use only the ones that are available when you first download the software. Now, when it comes to choosing colors, I actually thought on another palette before the one I'm working with here. I went for a purple and lime green color palette to his clothes, being the coat purple and all the rest dark green or lime green with the golden details of the jewelry and the embroidery. I mostly work with colors that are opposite to each other in the color wheel, so purple and lime green work fine. I thought of purple because it's historically a royal color, for it was a rare pigment and therefore quite expensive to have clothes on that shade as far as I know. On lime green, when we talk about the associations and psychology of colors, a lot of villainous characters have green or lime green as their main color because it is one of the associations we unconsciously make. We are talking Infernal Majesty here, so there should be some evil royalty on the color palette. Lime green and purple seem to work really fine with that. But as I block the colors, which means coloring it all really bad just to have an idea if the shades I chose work fine with what I'm imagining them, it looked really bland and no idea why. It didn't stand out as much as I wanted to. It had to be quite imposing and striking, but it was too dark and bland. The lime green wasn't standing out as much as I wanted it, and the purple on the cape made it even darker. I didn't want the cape to be a green because the whole royal pigment thing, so I decided to try a whole new thing. I have this weird thing of associating songs to color sometimes, and Majesty is very much a red, sometimes orange and gold song to me, so I decided to try that. Analogous colors, meaning colors that are side by side on the color wheel, also work very well too, so it wasn't going to be a disaster. I painted his cape red at first, though, and he looked like an infernal Santa Claus, so wasn't going to be a disaster was an understatement. I kept thinking about it because most royal capes are red and white, and again, analogous colors. Majesty being a red, orange and gold/yellow song, I tried that as a dégradé on the cape and it worked. Now, Terzo and Ghost in general uses a lot of black in his clothes, and that can be a pain to color, because if I went all black, it would mix up with the line art, and for the style I'm working with, that wouldn't look good. Plus, I already used a darker color on his throne, so I risked having everything look too muddy, dark and bland all over again. Again, because of values, if you think about values of black and white. The throne being a very dark color, his clothes being a very dark color, everything would be too much on the same value, basically. So it wouldn't stand out. I used something I learned from using color pencils then. A little bit of a story time, but I remember when I was in high school, I used to go to this art shop nearby and buy one expensive color pencil at a time. Usually imported from Europe, their quality was absurdly amazing, and so I used to buy one pencil every 5 or 6 months. In this shop, there was also some big color pencil cases, those ones with, I don't know, 300 different colors, and I always dreamt of having one of those. It is as expensive as a car where I live though. I started paying attention to the colors of those professional pencil cases and buying only 1 or 2 similar colors I couldn't find on the cheap ones. I noticed though, they had 5 to 10 shades of black pencils and I was amazed. Being the little cryptid that I am, I used a lot of black pencils in my drawings, but I realized it was really hard to differentiate the parts of the drawing when you are painting with only one shade and the very same shade. I wondered how people did it, and there was my answer: the base color behind the black shade. There were black pencils with a warmer shade of black, black pencils with a cooler shade of black, and black pencils that were very neutral. If you play Baldur's Gate, for example, you might notice that if you want to make your character's hair black, for instance, you'll be given lots of shades of black. One of them has more of a purple background, another has more of a bluish, the other has more of a greenish, and you also have a more reddish choice too, if I'm not wrong. When the character is in shadow, the hair looks black, but when the strands of the hair reflect light, it reflects a purple, blue, green, or red light. Very dark and almost black, but it still has a color there. Same happened to a friend of mine in high school who had pitch black hair and colored it purple without bleaching. The result, her hair remained the same, but when she was in the sun, the highlights were this beautiful deep purple color. It was very cool. If you have dark hair, it's a very nice idea. I applied the same logic here. Most of the black on his clothes have a red undertone, but some places that I wanted to stand out and not become a muddy blend thing have a blue undertone. There are also some blue, almost teal accents in some points of his clothes because I wanted to break that analogous color palette and make them stand out a bit too. The blue is opposite to orange, so it works with what we're doing here. As long as I don't overuse it and use it only as some accents, it won't be too jarring and it will blend well with the colors that I am already using. I used that as the undertone for the second black color I needed, the one I used on his hair, for instance. When I blocked the colors, it looked fine for me, and then I went to coloring as you are seeing here. With this style, I don't want to shade a lot and add too much detail on the coloring department. It is supposed to be more graphic, even if I am failing miserably at the mission at this point. But I mostly use the same colors I already chose and use a multiply layer to make them darker. On my version of Krita though, the multiply layer and the add layer are inverted. Usually, the multiply layer makes things darker, and the add layer makes things lighter. For some reason, on my software, the multiply layer makes it lighter, and the add layer makes it darker. So if you're actually trying to read which layers I am using, and I'm saying I use multiply to shade, the video will show the layer mode I'm using is add. That's because it's inverted on my crazy little parallel world. The rule is, it's a multiply layer. If the multiply layer isn't working correctly in your software, try the add layer, and if that works, congratulations, you are in the same crazy little parallel world as I am. You get used to it. That's most of the rendering I am doing on this illustration. Most of it is just flat coloring and line art. The next part of the rendering is adding the dramatic lighting, and that gives the illustration more of a mood, so to speak. So, I learned with my mentor what they use for movies, which is 3-point lighting. Basically, what I work with is an ambient light, a quote-unquote proper light and a rim light. Those are not the names of the 3-point lighting, but that's how I call it. With the ambient light, it's more of a color wash that will make everything come together as one, as I chanted before on the Hunter's Moon video. I tested lots of colors and layer modes to see which one works better, but it's like slapping a filter over your illustration. With that filter, the colors will blend better together and seem like your subject is actually standing somewhere with an ambient light. For example, if you want to paint a character who is outside during the sunset, the ambient light would be a burnt orange color. After painting all the character's colors, I would paint a whole layer with a bright orange color, set it to multiply and lower the opacity until I had that sunset effect. Voila! You have your ambient light color wash. That applies to everything you want. If they are in a cyberpunk city drenched in neon lights, the ambient light will be maybe a bright neon pink. If they are wandering in the streets at night, the ambient light might be a deep blue. If they are playing in the snow, the ambient light might be a pale bright blue, and so it goes. With this illustration though, he's not actually anywhere, so I can be creative and test lots of different colors, settling with the one I think brings everything together the most. I will say though, one of my favorites is bright purple in very, very low opacity. It gives me the Resident Evil 6 feels that when I first looked at the final art of Leon, I was like, I would marry this man right here at this moment, Your Honor. And it turns out it was just me marveling at how well Capcom give him that beautiful purplish undertone in his skin, and how the hell I could do that too. It was ambient light. After that comes what I call quote-unquote proper light, which in my case I work with shadows. I choose another color, a darker one perhaps, and set the new layer to multiply. Then I ask myself, where is the light coming from? And everything the light doesn't touch is covered in the shadows I start to block and refine. I didn't do that on this one here. I used the ring light and the quote-unquote proper light as almost the same thing. I decided the only light that would be hitting him would be the ring light, and it spared me the trouble. I did want to make a red or orange light coming from below, as if the flames of hell itself, but that leg of his, the crossed one, would get in the way and it would only light up half of his face, since his leg would cast a shadow there. It wouldn't look as bad and nice as I thought it would, and it would be more jarring to have only half of his face lit up from below than cool and badass, so I scrapped that idea. A thing to know though, we artists do have artistic license. I could do the light on his entire face anyway, knowing it would be wrong, because his leg would actually cast a shadow if the light came from below, but I decided not to. Even if it looked nice, it would kind of defeat the whole simpler, more graphical art style I decided anyway. So, I had to hold myself back with that one. Last but not least, ring light, my beloved. Ring light is literally a light coming from behind the character. It makes it pop out and not blend in with everything else on the illustration. Again, Baldur's Gate does that a lot. Sometimes there isn't even a logical place where the light is coming from, but the ring light gives that more cinematic look when you speak with the characters. It's cool to pay attention to that in concept pictures. It happens a lot because usually the lights are behind the artists, so they have this ring light framing them and making them pop from the bright colors or of the background or the dark colors of the same background they are in. Using the pictures of your favorite artists to study dramatic lighting and three-point lighting can be very nice as an exercise. Also, movies use that a lot too, so using some movie stills to try to figure out what are the local base colors of the scene, which is the color of the ambient light, then figure out where the main light source is coming from to block the shadows, and then add the ring light can be a very cool exercise. I am always doing those studies. On this illustration, the ring light isn't too obvious, but on the Hunter's Moon illustration, I literally use it to make Copia pop from the background moon. I also use the same thought process on my Webtoon, with a white quote-unquote aura around my characters to make them pop from the backgrounds. Again, I tend to choose very saturated and bright colors, so I have to make them pop somehow. With the Webtoon, though, I don't shade nor use any sort of light effect. It's only base local colors to make things very, very simple and quick for me to work on. So this aura solution is the best solution I could find. Here, I also use this quote-unquote aura thing with a bright tomato red color. That's because after I had everything done, I noticed that the line art was blending with the actual background, the almost black purple, and the details got lost in there. My main issue was his scepter and halo, so I had to think of a way to make them not get lost but still fit in a dark background. Enter the aura thing. It works on my Webtoon, so I decided to test here, and hey, it worked too. Also, the golden yellow with the bright red aura on his halo actually became a very nice effect. It doesn't matter how much we plan illustrations, some cool things we only discover as we go and test different ideas. The very last thing to note, I think, is that I did use a pale yellow to brighten up some points in Terzo's face. The point of the face that naturally receive more light, being the top part of his nose, the chins, the cheeks, and a little bit on the forehead. This is very much the artistic license I mentioned. There is no reason for this pale yellow light, but I added it or else everything would look too dark and convoluted. Well, I think that's it for this one. Personally, I think line art is a lot easier and more intuitive than coloring, because the color process always requires a lot more effort and attention and time from my part. Out of curiosity, what about you? Which parts of the drawing do you feel more at ease doing? I am seriously curious about this because I've seen a lot of people being so comfortable with coloring, and I'm always thinking you guys are mythical creatures. As a last thing I want to add, if you heard cars and motorcycles during this video, I literally live next to a hill, like right now. The vehicles come up the hill like they are on Mad Max, and there isn't much I can do about them. I always re-record when there is someone particularly noisy, but trust me, even when I try to record at 3 a.m., some Immortan Joe aficionado goes through my street. With that being said, thank you so much for being here, for watching, for liking and subscribing. I am already working on a new illustration, and I hope to bring something nice for Halloween this year, as well as keep on working on my Webtoon. You can find all the links to my work and where to find me down below. And as always, I hope this was useful and you have learned something, or at least had a good time here with yours truly. Hope you have a nice week, and I hope to see you again soon.